This week I did some assembly and some Bondo glazing putty. To continue on from the last video that was about PETG, I don't know what I did, but it started printing better. I got several pieces of the foot frames done in PETG. That's what I'm really trying to do, is get all of those finished. Unfortunately, this one here, which is over a 5-hour print, I went out to get lunch. I came back, it was this far done, and the nozzle was above it, just continuing to act like it was printing, but it obviously wasn't. And there were little blobs of black PETG all over the place. So what happened is that the extruder quit extruding filament into the nozzle. I tried to clear it and restart. I can't get it to restart. Now today is supposed to be like a near record temperature day. Inside the house it is 77 Fahrenheit. So I'm thinking that what's going on is it's heat creep. I'm thinking that the ambient temperature is so hot, combined with the heat of the bed, which I run 85 degrees for the first layer and 80 for the rest of the layers. I'm thinking that it's just the combination of 77 ambient and 85 or 80 degree bed is just making the filament jam up in the heat break, possibly. I don't see anything wrong if I take the filament out and just turn the nozzle temperature up past the melt point of PETG. Filament comes out, but then when I try to load filament, it just gets to a certain point, and I mean it's like it's pulling it all the way down, it seems, into the nozzle, but it just maybe a little bit comes out, it seems okay, and then I start to print, and then it, after about 30 seconds, it stops extruding the filament. So my plan right now is just to stop for this week. Cooler temperatures later this week. My work days come up next, so it's a good time to stop, I guess. So on the good news front is I've got a lot of the drive B frame pieces printed. They're not left and right, they're drive A and drive B. One of them's left, one of them's right. So I have this piece left to do for drive B. Drive A, I have the large motor frame, and then also for drive B here I have the large motor frame. Now that's the big piece that holds the motor, and I've tried over and over and over and can't get it to print. It lifts off the bed. This one looks like it was just barely starting to lift a tiny bit in this corner. After it had printed for about an hour, I threw blue tape across all of these helper discs at an angle in an attempt to hold it down. This piece for frame A, for drive A side, is a little bit warped because this side came off a little bit, but looking at where it's situated in the build, I think the part that's warped, that shows the warp, is on the outside of the foot, and I don't think it will structurally have an impact on anything other than maybe the foot shell won't be flush up against it. Maybe there'll be a little bit of a gap where it's warped, which if that proves to be an issue, I could probably put Bondo, just a light coat over the little bit that it's off where it's warped. So So yeah, that's where I'm at with PETG. It actually did start printing for me, and I can't say exactly what I did to make it start working, because I changed some settings, and I also got one of these food dehydrator that you cut the rings out of the trays, and there's room in there for a spool of filament. And I dried the filament there. I have the dial between 58 and 63 Celsius, and I had filament in there. The one spool I put for about 13 hours. And when I first started printing, this was the first thing I printed in the white filament, which I'm trying to do frame A, drive A pieces in white and drive B pieces in black, just so I can throw them all in a box and won't have to worry about which one's from which side, since they're in the foot. It's not something you see, so you won't know that they're different colors. So yeah, the first piece was this one, which warped a bit on this side as it printed, but it finished. Like I said, looks like good enough to use. And then I decided to try some small things. So I printed some small hinges from the door folder, and they printed great. And then I printed some other stuff, and it's like, it was, for whatever reason, it was printing just fine. And everything I was printing was small. So it looked like my main problem was anything that's large comes off the bed after about 4 or 5 hours, but small things were printing okay. So I got a lot of PETG printing done before this issue with what I'm assuming is heat creep. Heat creep as in, again, ambient temperature is so hot, plus the bed temperature is so hot that the filament is just getting melted in the heat break tube inside the hot end and ends up getting jammed. Hopefully that's what it is, because I really don't want to take that whole thing apart. I do have another fan. The Prusa printer is what I'm printing the PETG on, and it comes with a Noctua fan that cools the heat sink. And Noctua fans are really quiet, but part of being quiet is they don't flow as much air as a faster spinning fan. So from Printed Solid Company, I ordered, I think it's a Sunlu fan. Anyway, it's a fan that is noisier than the Noctua, but it passes more air. So the only reason I didn't swap that over today is because I looked at it, and the Prusa, the way the fan wire is routed, it looks like I'm going to have to cut some zip ties off and loosen the back of the whole extruder, the way it mounts to the x-axis, and yeah, it looks like a pain in the neck that I'm not really up for today. So again, when it's cooler, I'll try and reprint this piece and see if I can keep my luck going with PETG, and hopefully that was mainly a temperature issue. Second thing going on here is the skirt. I am gluing, that's why it's clamped, this into two pieces. This is ring 1 of the body, which I have glued into two pieces. I've decided to do that and then prime, instead of priming 4 pieces and then gluing them together. I don't know if that's a good idea or not. It's just something that I decided to do. So the other thing I'm doing is Bondo glazing putty before I prime. So I use a plastic, what do you want to call it? Whatever you want to call it. It's like a Bondo spreader, or like a vinyl, something you use when you apply vinyl stickers to something. It's like a squeegee type flexible plastic tool. So I put some glazing putty on, and then I use that tool to basically force it into the cracks. So it's just a very light coat. I just finished one tube of glazing putty, and it lasted for the dome. My dome, which I put, I think, 2 layers of it on the dome in trouble spots. I don't think I covered the entire dome, but areas that I knew were trouble areas. And then all of these pieces of the skirt, and all of the pieces of body ring 1. So one tube went that far because that's how thin I'm putting it on. It just, I don't know, it just seemed to me, most people just spray the primer and that's the first step. Or if you're in England and you can get, instead of sandable primer that we have in the States, in England they can actually have spray putty. So it's a combination of like the glazing putty, but in a spray. So I put that on, and then that showed me some areas, like these areas here that are plain white right now. They had some raised artifacts, part of ringing. If you see the holes, they were completely exactly adjacent to the holes. And here they were up near the top. This one they were more a bit lower. So I did sanding of the extreme plastic that's too high, and then just figured I'd put just a real thin coat and then sand it off back to the plastic of the glazing putty, and then I'll go ahead and prime. And again, I don't know why I decided to glue 2 pieces together instead of starting out with priming them all. Another thing I did, I'm using Weld-On 16 for glue. It's an acrylic glue. It does give a really good bond, but I wanted a little bit more than that. So right here I tried friction welding, where you put a piece of filament in a rotary tool, spin it really fast, and then drag it along a seam, and the friction of the spinning filament melts it into the part as you move up. So I did that before I tested it. So I did that, and I'm like, well, that looks pretty cool, but it doesn't seem to be really going in there as much as just kind of going on. So, being the first time I did it, maybe I didn't quite get the, how do you want to say it, the nuance of what angle to hold the rotary tool at and how much pressure to use, etc. Speed of the rotary tool. So I took a couple pieces of spare plastic and then clamped them together and did the same thing on both sides of the scrap plastic, and then saw if I could pull it apart. And I could fairly easily. So either I'm not doing a very good job of the friction welding, or like I said, it's just the angle, the nuances of it, whatever, but it didn't seem to do a very good job. So the next thing I read about was using a soldering iron and melting filament. And I thought, well, okay, that's obviously going to make a good bond, because you're taking 2 pieces of plastic that are next to each other, and you're melting kind of a channel in them, and then you're melting filament over the top of them. Now, if you'll notice, both of these are a different color. I could not find any scrap of the white that I used to print these body panels with. It was Zyotech white, and as you can see from this piece here, that started white, then went to Zyotech purple, then Zyotech orange. I pretty much used up all of the white, although I thought I had a little bit left. I can't find it. I have like 3 or 4 little bits of printed solid white, which is what I'm doing ring 2 and ring 3 of the body in. And that's what this is. It's a brighter white. So it's not, you should try and use the exact same brand filament as the parts that you're joining together, because each manufacturer might have a slightly different recipe in their filament manufacture. But still, I did the same thing. I took 2 pieces of spare plastic. They were, in both cases, the piece I tried plastic friction welding and the soldering iron welding. The plastic was the printed solid white plastic and not this Zyotech. But when I did the again, the Zyotech friction welding, I could break it apart fairly easy. When I did it this way, I did the same thing. I clamped them together. I took, and I'm using an older Radio Shack soldering iron that's, you know, just one temperature. It's not adjustable. I haven't used it in years. So I used it to first just slowly went along the seam between these 2 pieces to make a slight indentation, which also has the effect of right there, you're kind of joining the 2 pieces together, melting them together, because you're making a dish of melted plastic, so you're kind of mushing what's there together. And then I took a spare piece of filament and just kind of like a welding rod, held the filament in one hand and the soldering iron in the other, and just kind of slowly went up, mushing down the filament on top of this. And my test piece, I did that on both sides, and I cannot break it apart. No glue used, just doing the welding, and I can't break it apart. Now, I'm giving it about 90% of my strength. If I go to 100%, I might be able to break it apart, but it really doesn't feel like it. But 90% of my strength is, you know, that it's a pretty good test that it's working, and it's working well. So even though it's not the prettiest thing, I'm not going to do it anywhere you're going to see it. And if I do, I just did it on the inside. I didn't do it on the back. I might do it on the back as well, but first what I want to do is try sanding this back down. Again, because I made a channel, because I'm melting this all over, even if I sand it down, there should be enough there that it's definitely making a stronger bond. Now, I am going to have to sand part of this down, because there's a plate that goes over all these holes, and its shape is going to come up over this. Now, I haven't printed the plate. It's supposed to be printed, they recommend, in PETG. It's too large for the bed of the Prusa. There is one that's cut in half, like these body pieces here are also all meant to be printed on a printer with 500 by 500 millimeter print bed, and then somebody cut them into different pieces so they can print on a smaller print bed. But I don't think there's any way I'm going to be able to get that large of a piece, even if it's just half the size of that plate, to print out of PETG successfully. I mean, that's a large surface area for a big flat plate. So I'm thinking that I might do that in PLA+. All this so far, apart from obviously the PETG that I've been talking about, I have done in just PLA. The body, I only have one more piece to do for ring 3, and it will be done all in PLA. When I get to the legs, I'm thinking that I'm going to order some PLA+, PLA Plus is supposed to be a bit stronger than regular PLA. It's PLA with some additives in it that make it a bit tougher, make the melt point a little bit higher, but it's still supposed to print fairly easily like PLA as opposed to this PETG stuff, which is, at least for me, proving to be a big challenge to get print right. So that was kind of my week this week. Starting to glue some parts together. Again, it's such a hot day today that I wasn't gonna paint primer. These have been more than 24 hours. One of them is at least 24 hours. The glue has been drying. The other one is at least 48 hours. So they are ready to go outside and be painted with primer. But I just glued these today. So next week maybe, or there is supposed to be some rain at some point, but at least the hottest days seem to be over. So hopefully I'll get a day that's not too hot and not rainy, that I'll be able to spray some sandable filler primer on these and maybe actually get the skirt and ring 1 glued together as full pieces. Now again, I can't print that big plate in the middle. There's no way that PETG, unless whatever I did to my printer settings and drying the filament made such a big change that it's going to stop that from warping. Other people have printed the entire thing in just regular PLA or PLA Plus, so I might also use the PLA Plus to print that center piece. Basically what it's for, apart from structural support, you see the holes in the skirt, bolt heads go under here, and then this first ring of the body goes on top of the skirt, the bolts come up through here, and then there's that big plate, and then nuts go on the top to secure all 3 of those things together. In fact, the skirt you're not even supposed to glue to the bottom of this ring. You're just supposed to let the bolts hold it there. So what goes under that plate is the center leg. So it is kind of load bearing. The center leg does support some of the weight of the droid, which is why they want that to be something like PETG or ABS, something really strong. Another thing I could do is possibly make one out of plywood. That would be stronger than plastic, but I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't plan on taking R2 out for that many trips. So, if any, I'm thinking the PLA Plus will probably be fine for that centerpiece. And again, since you bolt everything together, I'm not sure if you glue that centerpiece to the first ring of the body or not, or if you just, again, bolt all 3 pieces together and the only thing holding it together are the bolts. Because in that case, then yeah, I could just print it out of PLA or PLA Plus, and if at some point I notice that it's failing, it's got cracks in it or something, then it'd be like, oh, okay, I got to reprint this in something stronger, or make it out of wood or something like that. So yeah, so still have 1 piece left to print for ring 3, and then that will be all of the main body pieces finished, and I'm holding off on starting the legs, partly just due to financial reasons. I've still got doors to print for the body. I've printed some of the hinges I've printed in PETG. There's some other rings that go on the dome and attach to the Lazy Susan that I still have to print. So there's still some body parts that I have to print. But I'm kind of holding off on the legs, kind of like I originally printed the dome and held off on the body, just to kind of see how it goes. If I prime these and get them together and everything's looking cool, then I'll probably get the itch to start printing the legs. Oh, I've also printed all of the greebles, right? The hex vents and the hex ports and the vents and all of the things that go in these recessed areas of the body. So those I can sand. So I've got a lot of priming, sanding, and gluing to do before I even get to worrying about printing the legs. So space is another issue. I mean, I'm out here, basically in our laundry room filming this because I'm out of space in my work area with 2 printers and a couple computer desks and my soldering station and everything else. So I've got one plastic bin full of the body parts in addition to these body parts, and then I've got 2 boxes with greebles in them and a box with just the PETG drive unit parts in it, and a box of dome electronics, and the dome sitting on top of a light fixture on top of my soldering station. And so getting this together, and I don't know, either putting it together in the garage, or there's an area in the house that I'm planning for R2 to live in, whether to start taking that space over with the body parts and then just as they get done moving them over to that area. I'll just have to see. But yes, running out of space here, so that's another reason to hold off on printing the legs. Got a bookshelf with a plastic bin in it that's got the body parts, and then these are on another shelf of another level of the bookshelf. And as they get bigger and glued together, then it's obviously not going to fit on a bookshelf. In fact, even now that they're glued into 2 pieces each, they don't really fit on a bookcase anymore, but I'm managing to get them up there. And the last thing I want to do is bump them off and break something. So that's it for this week. It is progress. It is slow progress. Think that the printing times are long. Wait for all the sanding and priming and all that stuff. That's when it hits you when you start doing this. Why it takes so long to build one of these. But hey, it's keeping me out of trouble, so we'll see you for the next update.